Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the forum's first panel discussion in the Access Industry Forum's 2013 Working at Height Knowledge Base. For anyone not familiar with the forum, it consists of 10 of the leading trade associations and federations whose member companies are involved in the work at height sector. For today's discussion, Finding the Holy Grail, Making Progress or Marking Time, it gives me great pleasure to welcome, first of all, Barry Holt, Director of Policy and Research at the International Institute of Risk and Safety Management. And he today will be joined by Peter Bennett, who's Managing Director of PASMA and Chairman of the Access Industry Forum. The Holy Grail initiative, No More Work at Height Accidents Ever, began life as a panel discussion in the Knowledge Base here in Birmingham, and has since developed or been developed by the forum as a focus for cooperation with leading health and safety organizations represented today. They have joined together in the quest to reduce and ultimately eliminate falls from height. The Holy Grail Group has been working towards establishing a pan-industry method for reporting falls from height that will provide sufficient information and insight to better target future campaigns and initiatives and inform future product design, industry training and guidance. The first question I would like to put to the two panelists today is whether they still believe in the quest for the Holy Grail, no more work at height accidents ever. Is it still practicable? Is it still realistic? Especially when only yesterday, here in this very room, HSE reported 40 deaths in 2002 alone, resulting from falls from height. So if I can put that question first of all to Barry.
Good afternoon, or good morning.
Oh, it's afternoon? No,
it's afternoon.
Yep.
That's actually a very good point, because what we're trying to do is actually ideally eliminate falls from height. I think most of us working in health and safety will actually realise that when I see a company say our objective is 0 accidents, I get a little bit cynical. I mean, we can actually reduce the likelihood, we can reduce the severity of incidents, but we can't necessarily, short of stopping the activity that we're doing, closing the factory gates, it's very difficult to actually say we will actually totally eliminate things. What we realistically want to do is to try and reduce the likelihood of these falls from height to as low a level as possible. I'm purposely not using the dreaded phrase as reasonably practicable. We want to try and get it even lower if we can. And one of the problems that we've had is you can't do this without data. And particularly with the change in RIDDOR reporting that we've seen recently, the data that we can get from the traditional sources, such as the HSE and the Labour Force Survey and others, is not as comprehensive as it used to be. So we've actually felt that what we need to do is to actually develop a reporting system and an incident analysis system for the industry as a whole, so that we'll be able to sort of collect your incident data, and we'll actually be able to provide management information for you on how we can actually reduce the likelihood of these incidents happening, which, as we heard from the speaker on the video, the falls from height are the second largest causes of incidents after slips and trips. So what we're actually aiming to do is to try and make sure we have better data, and data that reflects the industry's activities. And so I'm trying to preempt some of the sort of thoughts, but in my view, we have actually gone quite a long way down the line to doing that.
Peter, can I just ask you to perhaps comment on the search for the Holy Grail and how you feel that that might be achievable?
I think I mentioned last year when I was here that I'm a bit of an idealist, and from an idealist point of view, if you look at every accident most certainly is avoidable, and you have to come from the viewpoint, or I feel you have to come from the viewpoint that at some point there will be this nirvana where there are no more falls from heights. In the meantime, though, as Barry has said, we do need to be realistic and set some milestones along the way to say, okay, let's just improve where we are just now and get closer to that nirvana. And as Barry has touched on, and I know we'll be talking about it a little bit more, the base point needs to be that we need to have some reliable data that we can analyse and look at to give us some indications as to where we should be directing action and where we should be directing attention to get a good return and to make a difference to the incidence of falls from height where it's going to have the greatest effect.
Can I just ask you to be a little bit more specific about the sort of information that you feel you need and why the existing information isn't adequate? And surely some of this information might be available from other sources. For example, perhaps the British Insurers Association, who surely have a range of information that would be available. Is that a valid comment?
Excuse me, this is certainly something that we've discussed at some of our Holy Grail meetings, that there is a body of data out there. But as Barry has touched on previously, our traditional sources of data from either the HSE RIDOR data or from the, what was the other one again?
Labour Force
the
Survey.
Labour Force Survey. Although that data is there, it is very difficult to mine that data to give us, as I say, meaningful information. You mentioned the insurers. We explored that possibility that we may be able to get some additional data from insurers, but it has been notoriously difficult, particularly because there are legal, there are civil liability issues around some of the insurance claims, and you've got that. You have the issue of one party perhaps not wishing to give information on the basis that it may compromise their case. To take it back a little bit, even under the previous RIDOR reporting regime, it has been very difficult from our point of view as a work at height industry to gather meaningful data and statistics that we can act upon. So what we're trying to do and what we're aiming to do with this voluntary falls reporting system is to, if there is a fall has been reported, that we stream it in a direction and we ask appropriate questions that will give us some meaningful data. So, for instance, just as a very, very quick example, it would be extremely useful for us to know the answer to one of three possibilities. First of all, did this fall happen from an existing place of work, so from a roof or from a flat roof or something like that? Did this fall occur from a piece of work equipment which is specifically designed for work at height? Or did the fall occur from a piece of equipment which is not designed for work at height, so a table or a chair or something like that? And if we could even just have an answer to those questions, we would be making a considerable step forward. There are other things that I can go into, but we'll maybe cover that in a moment.
I think a good example of that last one was if those of you who were watching the news recently about the parliamentary elections in Pakistan probably saw Imran Khan fall off the ballot on a forklift truck, on which there were several people actually standing beside himself.
So, assuming you have this information in the form that you feel it's necessary, and it gives you enough background and insight into the nature of the fall, the characteristics of the fall, and so on. How would that be collated? Where would it be collated? How would it be analysed? What would the mechanism be for actually using the information?
Sorry, I'll just... Okay. I think maybe before we go there, Christelle, I think that perhaps we should put a little bit more detail into it. As well as asking the question to ascertain, where did this fall from height occur? What we also want to do is we want to, if we know that it's from work at height equipment, which is specifically designed for the purpose, we want to be able to identify which work at height equipment it is. And having established which type of work at height equipment it is, that allows us to, again, stream it in a direction to say that's a tower or that's a ladder. And at the moment, even with the previous FRIDO regime, we've not been able to do that. We then want to go a little bit further and ask some questions about, well, why did the fall from height occur? And again, to try and keep it nice and simple to start with, we have a choice, I think, of about 4. The main one being that there's inadequate edge protection, as an example. Then what we also want to try and get a feel for is what kind of height are we talking about? Is it below 2.5 metres? Is it between 2.5 and 5? Is it higher than 5? We then want to get some feel for the person who fell from height. Have they been trained, and have they been trained in a recognised scheme? Now, those are just some of the questions that will go a long way to informing where we need to direct attention, as I say, either in terms of product design or possibly in training, and where we need to perhaps alter the emphasis in some of those areas. We don't know exactly what it may tell us, because the data does not exist at the moment. But it may tell us, for instance, that the majority of these falls from height occur from people who have not been trained, or it may tell us that a lot of these incidences of falls from height are from people who have been trained, in which case we need to look at the training.
Yes.
But sorry, to maybe go back to your question, our intention is, it's not enough for us to have gathered this data. We also need to put into place a mechanism, as Barry has touched on before, to analyse that data, to publish it, and to make it available as a body of data to be used in research, to as I say, point us in the direction that we need to be going. Sorry, Barry.
Yeah.
Cut you off.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of one of the most important factors, I think, that the quality of the data that we're trying to collect directly will affect how useful it is. I mean, I know that's an obvious statement, but it is actually very true.
I'm not trying to be rude by interrupting you in mid-flow. Apologies for that. Magic words on the screen there, finding the Holy Grail. Yet we're talking about data, so it's as if we're waiting for people to fall before we can get the data, before we can do something about it. Wouldn't the Holy Grail be something like a free phone number on the side of all builders' vans, or an advert on television where somebody sees somebody doing wrong that could potentially lead for a fall for a height, could ring that number and report somebody, give them the name of the builder, and we could rather go after them before they fall rather than waiting for data to collect so we can do something about them after they've fallen? Sure. Wouldn't that be a Holy Grail? Sorry.
Well, it's another way of approaching it. I mean, we're actually looking at a range of options, and I mean, one we've actually developed to a sort of pilot stage. We've actually developed an online system that we're now going to want to test out, and we're looking at the various mechanisms by which we can get information in, or get data into that. So it could be, that could be one of your, that could be a suggestion for doing that. Alternatively, I mean, the organisations here that are involved, we all have websites, and it could be accessed through that. So at the moment, we have got ideas on that. We're going to pilot them, but we're also still open to other suggestions. And I think, you know, that you're thinking of the sort of thing that am I driving well, sort of thing, and a telephone number.
Yeah, I was in the forces for 23 years.
Switch button on.
She's on, she says. It's okay. I was in the forces for a period of time, and we sort of counter-terrorism, we did the same thing on the side of all our vehicles. We put a telephone number, so if somebody knew something, they could ring anonymously and tell us what was going on, so we could potentially let those agencies that needed to know what was going on, and they could look into it for us, sort of thing. And it kind of worked in a way. It gave us an edge, if you like, pardon the pun, and put us 1 foot in front in some cases, so we could prevent something from happening.
Sure.
And I drive. I'm an IIRSM member. I'm a graduate member, but I've got no power. The amount of times I've seen something go wrong, take a photograph, send it to the HSE, and I don't know what happens about it.
Well,
there's no need a free phone number anymore. You can't get through. So I'm a frustrated professional. Apart from stepping up and saying, "Look, mate, someone's going to die soon," and getting a punch in the face for my trouble, I don't know what to do about it. But I think we need to be a bit more proactive if we could.
Yeah, I think it's one of the strands, one of many strands that the group are actually looking at the moment to try and achieve this ultimate objective of meeting the Holy Grail, which is to reduce and hopefully at some point in time eliminate force from height. So I think it's an area that could be looked at as part of this whole process. Just going back to that in terms of the data collection, and again back to the title of this presentation, what progress has been made in terms of putting in place or creating a system or a model for how this information could be practically collected? Peter.
Yep. As you say, the title of the panel is Making Progress or Marking Time, and it may seem like we're marking time and we're not making much progress, but there has been a lot of work going on in the background to look at and to establish, how can we get a feel for where we are and what difference the various initiatives and training schemes and such like of all of the work at height organisations make to this. And what difference does it make in terms of product design and development? I mean, a lot of the products which are out there in use for working at height have fall protection built in or designed in. Without doubt, we're agreed that there are initiatives that can make a difference. But in respect of, and the reason we're spending so much time talking about this issue of gathering data is because we need to have some data to know whether we are making a difference and to point us in the direction where we should go. In time, I agree with you, it should be the case that we do not confine that to accident reporting, but that we also extend it to near misses, and we extend it to take account of what could have happened. In the first instance, we need to get some system in place that does more than the current system, which, as I say, gathers very little information that is of use to us. We, as I say to you, are agreed that there are initiatives that can make a difference, but we're also agreed that we must get stakeholder buy-in, and that has to be stakeholder buy-in down the entire stakeholder chain. Not just work at height organisations, not just safety organisations, but users, trade unions, and people who are at the sharp end. And that's an important factor of what we're trying to get. We are agreed that we don't want to go off half-cocked and just be seen to be doing something. We want to make sure that we get it right, and that when we get it right and we roll it out, we will be able to come up with some meaningful data. And again, our intention, is certainly my thinking on it, is if we can, at some point in the future, be able to produce a body of evidence that says this is the data that we have gathered, and if this were to be made mandatory, how much more information would we get that will inform us and point us in the direction that we should be going in? Sorry.
Yeah, it actually brings me to sort of to one point in which I'm actually going to ask you a favour.
Sure.
We've actually gone quite a long way to developing a prototype. Well, we have got a prototype, but before we can actually take it much further, we need to have live data that we can actually use it on. And that's where we'd like to get some help from other stakeholders. Mm-hmm. It's all very well for sort of PASMA, IIRSM, IOSH, to actually provide data, but is that truly representative data? That's what we'd like to get, because we need to be able to prove, we need to be able to demonstrate that the system we're actually developing is going to not just work technically, but is actually going to provide you as stakeholders with information which actually adds value to what you're actually doing.
How about sort of modern technology? There's lots of different sort of applications available for these modern smart devices that have cameras in them. There's one called iAuditor, I think it is. It's a free download for health and safety people. You can take it. You can be on a risk assessment. You can take a photograph of something. You can put it straight to a website. So why not a free application that people can actually take a photograph of bad practice, including the name and number of the builder on the back of the van, by the way, and just mail that straight to you. That is live data, live photographs of something that potentially could cause what you're calling data. Before you get that data, before someone dies, you've got live data of bad practice. Well, you can choose what you do with that. You can report that to the HSE, but it'll give you data. You can see whether it's small to medium enterprises, large enterprises, specific equipment. It's probably just bad human behaviour as usual, and how we get around that I don't know.
Well, I mean, on that point, it is another issue that we certainly are looking at and we've addressed, and this is, I mean, we can, as work height organisations, we can design marvellous products, we can build in fall prevention, we can train them where we have very little understanding and where we want to direct a lot of our attention and we want to undertake research is those behavioural aspects. What happens when they go out of the training centre and use this equipment in a manner that they've not been trained to do, and that obviously is still causing falls from height. And that is something that we are very intent on, that we need to address. We need to understand what are these behavioural issues.
Yeah, I think that is your target area, really.
Absolutely.
It's behaviour. It's bad behaviour. It's maybe like a knowledge on the case of some people.
I mean, we had Paul Blanchard on here earlier, and Paul Blanchard is a victim of a fall from height. And I know I've spoken to others as well. None of them intend to. They don't intend to fall from height. But there are issues of, Paul mentions complacency. And I know that, certainly from my experience, people who work at height, particularly people who do it on a regular basis, it's not so much complacency, it's just they do not recognise the danger. There is no danger to them. They do it all day, every day, and they have no fear.
Yeah, which is where the management should come in, monitoring, auditing,
Correct.
reviewing, and kicking up backsides.
Absolutely.
But in the case of small to medium enterprises, sole traders,
Indeed.
You could use the public.
Yeah, as you're saying, there are many organisations, mainly work height organisations, who have a particular direction towards management and supervision, because most of our training, most of what we do is aimed at the users, and that's sensible, it's where it should be. But what we also need to address is that managers and supervisors should know and recognise good practice and bad practice. And if they're not trained and they don't recognise bad practice, we cannot expect them to step in and say, could you stop that, please, that's dangerous.
I was telling Peter earlier on this morning about a case that I encountered at a fairly large pharmaceutical company, where the two guys they were working on the roof of an extension, flat-roofed extension. First glance, everything looked okay, until you actually checked at where their fall arrest equipment would actually take effect, usually after they were bouncing up in the air again. And the way that was dealt with was the chief executive, who actually is a financial guy, so not a sort of site, not a construction guy. He actually came out to have a look. No. I was told afterwards by somebody who was there, I wasn't at site when he went, he said, I didn't know a chief executive actually knew that language. And apparently he actually described in very blunt terms, mainly four-letter words to be honest, what was going to happen to those guys if they didn't get it right. And they didn't, and he got rid of them.
Right, thank you, Barry. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so it's clear that the Holy Grail initiative is making progress. Some significant progress, tangible, practical progress has been made. If I can just ask the panel in summary what still needs to be done and what sort of timescales we might be looking at in terms of developing it further.
Okay. Oh, one thing I'd just like to reiterate, something I said a few minutes ago, is we actually need support from everybody, all the stakeholders. So if you are an organisation that would benefit from this initiative, and I think that applies to most organisations, if you could actually let us know that you would be prepared to work with us on this, to provide data, to do beta testing and so on, we could really start making quicker progress than we have to date. Because we need stakeholders to contribute as well.
Yeah. And I would just reiterate what Barry said there. One of the things that we have recognised in this last year, we've had some fairly regular meetings this last year, is that we have recognised that this is not just an issue for work at height organisations, and it's not just an issue for safety organisations, it's an issue for user organisations, and everyone in that stakeholder chain needs to be brought into the initiatives that we think will make a difference, and they need to have their input to say whether that's going to make a difference or whether we should be directing our resources and our efforts to something that will make a bigger and better difference.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much, Barry. We have another presentation to follow, but Barry and Peter will be available outside if you'd like to pursue this further. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How did you find it? Was it interesting?
There's obviously a lot of stuff that's gone on. I've read about this on the internet, the Holy Grail, and I just wanted to point out to the audience, in fact, that there is another option, a more proactive option than waiting for people to actually build up statistics before we can do something about it. And my positive thoughts were using mobile technology, for instance, mobile phones with cameras on them. Couldn't we develop an application that could capture somebody doing something wrong, send it in and build up data that way before they fall off, so you've got this database of data of bad practice. While you're at it, collect the telephone number of the van and report it somehow to prevent the bad behaviour, to address those bad companies that are doing these bad things before people fall off. Just another tack, really, a more proactive tack than waiting for stuff to happen. That's all I was trying to get across. And as you said on your itinerary or previous work you've done has come up with those ideas, but people seem to be talking about the same old thing, collecting data when people have fallen off, analysing whether it's the equipment or not. I understand that's important, but while we're doing that, people are still falling off. That was my point, really.
How did you find the feedback? Do you think it was work?
Good feedback, yeah. It did work. The fact that they said there is some thought towards that sort of thing and they're looking for ideas was a positive thought. So I've come back now to maybe put some of those ideas forwards and volunteer to get involved if I can, in any way, shape or form.
Great.